Good morning. This scripture is taken from Proverbs 15:1. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And then Proverbs 15:18. A hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but the one who is patient calms a quarrel. And Ephesians 4:26-27. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. This is the word of the Lord.
Morning. Oh, there we go. Whoa. Good morning. Today we are continuing with our series through Proverbs, and we're going to talk about handling anger wisely. But before we do, I want to play us a little clip. How many of you have seen Inside Out? Inside Out? Okay. So just some context if you've never seen Inside Out. Inside Out is a story of a girl named Riley, and she is about 11 years old, and you see the complexity of emotions. So each emotion, joy, sadness, anger, envy, they all have a character. So I just want you to pay attention to this scene where she's at the dinner table with her family, and anger is the red person, the red character, if you will. So let's play the scene.
So, as it turns out, the green trash can is not recycling. It's for greens, like compost and eggshells. And the blue one is recycling. And the black one is...
Riley's acting so weird. Why is she acting so weird?
What do you expect? All the islands are down.
Joy would know what to do.
That's it. Until she gets back, we just do what Joy would do.
Great idea. Anger, fear, disgust. How are we supposed to be happy?
Hey, Riley, I've got good news. I found a junior hockey league right here in San Francisco, and get this, tryouts are tomorrow after school. What luck, right?
Hockey?
Uh-oh, what do we do?
Guys, here, you pretend to be Joy.
Won't it be great to be back out on the ice?
Oh yeah, that sounds fantastic.
What was that? That wasn't anything like Joy.
Because I'm not Joy?
Yeah, no kidding.
Did you guys pick up on that?
Sure did.
Something's wrong.
Should we ask her?
Let's probe, but keep it subtle so she doesn't notice.
So, how was the first day of school?
She's probing us.
I'm done. You pretend to be Joy.
What? Okay,
It was fine, I guess. I don't know. Oh, very smooth. That was just like Joy.
Something is definitely going on.
She's never acted like this before. What should we do? We're gonna find out what's happening, but we'll need support. Signal the husband.
Ahem.
With a nice pass over to Reed, comes across that right.
Uh-oh, she's looking at us. What did she say?
What? Oh, sorry, sir. No one was listening.
Is it garbage night? We left the toilet seat up. What? What is it, woman? What?
He's making that stupid face again.
I could strangle him right now.
Signal him again.
So, Riley, how was school?
You gotta be kidding me.
For this, we gave up that Brazilian helicopter pilot?
Boo, I'll be Joy.
School was great, all right?
Riley, is everything okay?
Sir, she just rolled her eyes at us.
What is her deal? All right, make a show of force. I don't want to have to put the foot down.
No, not the foot.
Riley, I do not like this new attitude.
Oh, I'll show you attitude, okay? No. Stay happy!
What is your problem? Just leave me alone.
Sir, reporting high levels of sass.
Take it to DEFCON 2.
You heard that, gentlemen? DEFCON 2.
Listen, young lady, I don't know where this disrespectful attitude came from.
You want a piece of this, Pops? Come and get it!
Yeah, well...
Here it comes. Prepare the foot.
Keys to safety position. Ready to launch on your command, sir.
Just shut up!
Fire!
That's it. Go to your room. Now.
Foot is down. The foot is down.
Good job, gentlemen. That could have been a disaster.
Well, that was a disaster.
How many of us have been in a situation like that? Where one person gets angry, then the other person gets angry, then you get more angry, and then finally you storm out. Either it's us or we've been there when it's happened. And the thing with that scene is that each person's emotions are interplaying with each other. So you see the insides of everybody's emotions. So For example, you see that Riley's mom's default, right, is to deflect. She's just somebody who, in the moment of heatedness, she tries to keep the peace. So she wants to deflect. She wants to defer. She doesn't really express her anger at the way that Riley is talking. And she might have even learned that as a woman, maybe she can't express that anger. We don't know. The dad is kind of emotionally unavailable. He's not even paying attention to what's happening, and he's reactive. His reaction to Riley's anger is just to try to control her, like try to suppress it, just get in line, and he doesn't really try to connect with her. And then you see Riley, this 11-year-old, the way she reacts is just in anger on top of anger. So what we see here is that oftentimes our families have actually discipled us in the way that we are to deal with anger. We learn a lot about all of our emotions. How do we handle them? How do we handle them from our family dynamics? For some of us, we might have come from a family perhaps where when someone was angry, everyone else did their best to just make them happy. Like you all tried to appease that one person, and that person's anger got the best of everybody. Or you might have grown up in a family perhaps where silence, right? Somebody just goes silent when there's conflict, and that's their way of engaging. It could even be manipulative. There might be forms where we're used to people just name-calling, right? You start name-calling one another. You start blaming, criticizing, maybe sarcasm. Riley's mom actually does a little bit of sarcasm where she goes, "This again?" rather than actually engaging in conversation. Maybe some of us have been on the extreme side of unhealthy ways of handling anger, maybe hitting or violence that have come out when someone has handled their anger poorly. So all of us have been discipled or learned a particular way to handle anger, whether that's from our family. It could also be from our culture. Eastern and Western cultures tend to do anger very differently and what's acceptable in those norms. It could be our gender. For a lot of women, it's common that anger is not an emotion that we're allowed to express, but always have to appear kind, and kind of sadness is more acceptable, but anger is not. And for men, sometimes it's a little bit more acceptable to be angry than to express weeping or sadness. So there's all these different norms in our culture, in life, that impact how we handle anger. And for all of us, as we are here, we want to become like Jesus. So part of what we're doing are unlearning patterns that don't reflect Jesus. We're unlearning those habits, and we're trying to learn new ones that reflect a biblical model of anger. So today, we're going to talk about anger, handling anger wisely, because Proverbs has a lot to say about anger. It's a repeated theme. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at a biblical view of anger. We're going to talk about righteous versus sinful anger. What's the difference between those two types of anger? How to model healthy anger, so kind of giving us a step-by-step way. And then lastly, we're going to talk about forgiveness, because anger is often tied to that. So thank you for reading the main scriptures for today. So let's start here. Let's start with God. When God looks at the world, what we know is that his primary posture, when God looks at the world, at our world, his primary posture towards each of us is of love. God delights in us. First thing we see in Genesis is that he says that his creation is good. It is very good. His primary posture is one of love and delight towards us. But there are other emotions that are actually used to describe God. And one of those emotions is actually anger. It's commonly said throughout Scripture that he is slow to anger, especially when he sees things that are harming people, when he sees things that are harming his creation, that God experiences anger. So what are some of the things that we see breaking God's heart, that God gets angry at? And this is all under the category of sin, but I'm just going to call out a few of them. Idolatry, right? We see all throughout the scriptures that God often gets angry when people worship idols, and not just the idols that they create, but also idols in their heart, the things that they elevate above him, whether that be money or status or reputation, their own ego. All of those things are idols that each of us may worship. He gets angry about injustice in the world, exploitation of the poor and vulnerable. We see this when Jesus famously flipped tables in the temple in Matthew 21, when people who are supposed to care for the people, right, are selling things for profit and taking advantage of the poor. This is throughout the prophets, Amos, right? God is angry when there's these religious rituals, like people coming to church or to their form of temple, and people, meanwhile, are exploiting the poor during the rest of the week. They're ignoring the marginalized. So God is angry when we worship, but our worship does not change how we interact and care for the world. There's anger around religious hypocrisy. This is when we see this, for example, in Mark 3. It specifically says that Jesus got angry because he heals a man, and rather than people celebrating this healing of this man that has been healed, the people are just looking to catch Jesus in an act of breaking the law. So they miss that miracle because they're so stuck on, let me figure out how to catch Jesus. So there's many other things that we see. There's people refusing to repent from sin, people hardening their hearts. There's corrupt leadership that does not care for the people they're supposed to care for. So all of these things are things that it says that God gets angry about. But one of the things sometimes we think is that God is just like randomly angry. But God's anger is not random. His anger is always righteous. It's flowing from his love, from his refusal to not care about what harms people. It's his refusal to be indifferent to whatever harms people. So God's anger is a sign of how invested he is in the flourishing of our world and of us. We, as his people, are created in his image. So one of the things we experience is anger. There's no human being who doesn't experience anger. But what God's anger shows us is that anger and love are not opposites. Oftentimes, they go together. We know this intuitively when someone is angry on our behalf because something wrong happened to us. When they get angry, we feel a sense of we are loved, we are protected, and we are seen. Because if they didn't get angry about something wrong that happened to us, we'd be like, why don't you care? Why doesn't this matter to you? And so anger is often what love looks like in the face of evil, of injustice, of betrayal, of wrongdoing. So it shouldn't surprise us that people who walk closely with God in the scriptures, like in the Psalms, also bring their anger honestly to God. What we see in the Psalms is that anger is expected. David does not hide his frustration. He doesn't hide his anger. He wrestles with God. Those prayers there's raw honesty there, and sometimes there is just this furious, off-the-rails anger, it feels like. But God doesn't rebuke him for that anger. That kind of struggle is actually a sign of the strength of the relationship. That when you can bring your full self to someone, there's a strength in that relationship. Someone who feels like, I can't bring this to this person, it's actually a sign of the weakness of that relationship. One of our Old Testament professors used to say, conflict isn't the enemy. A lot of times we think that if there's an argument or if there's conflict, that is the enemy. That's what's meant to be avoided. But in fact, the fact that you're fighting with someone, and not just any way, there's the way you do it matters, but just the fact that there is a fight, a disagreement, perhaps with your best friend, your roommate, maybe your boss, your parent, your child, your spouse, there's a sense that you still are in it, that person still matters to you, that relationship is somehow still alive. There's something worth fighting for, something worth engaging rather than walking out on. Now, of course, how you fight matters because you could do it in really harmful ways, but conflict is not the enemy. Conflict or disagreement is not the enemy. And sometimes what's more dangerous than the actual conflict or the anger is actually the silence. Because silence is what says, I've given up, I've checked out, there's nothing left here for me. Now, most of us instinctively run from conflict. We want to run from it. There's something in us that makes us be like, oh no, I don't want to get into this. When we see people arguing, we assume something's wrong. But next time you see somebody arguing, just think to yourself, oh, they've still got something, and there's still something there. You can bless them. You can see that as a sign of blessing. They still got passion there. They still care about one another. It means that there's still something worth fighting for. They're still moving towards each other. A relationship where there's no willingness to engage isn't a sign of health. If you're unwilling to engage, that's a sign of unhealth. It's a sign of detachment. And not just that, but good conflict, when you handle it rightly and do it in a way that honors God, It can actually lead to deeper friendship, to deeper intimacy, with deeper trust with one another. Because you understand that this person hears me, this person sees me, God hears me, God sees me, and I'm going to be heard. Steps can be taken, right, to make things whole. So maybe the question today isn't, are you angry? Because if I were to ask each of you, there's probably something that you feel angry about. Maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a friendship, maybe it's something that happened decades ago, or maybe it's just you look at the state of the world and you feel angry. But the question is, are you honest enough and willing with God and others to bring your anger into the light so that it can be transformed and not buried? Are you honest enough with God and others to bring your anger into the light so it can be transformed and not buried? It's only when we bring our anger to God that He can transform it into something good, into something life-giving. It's only when we bring our anger to one another in a loving way, in a kind way, that we can have that relationship be transformed. It doesn't happen when we bury it. And oftentimes when we bury it, we think we're avoiding it and everything is good. But what happens is that it actually infects us. That anger still simmers inside of us and infects our own souls. It might not affect the other situation. It might not affect the person that you are holding something against, but it will infect our own souls. I think one of the reasons we kind of avoid anger is because we know it's very powerful. There's a power in anger that sometimes feels like can't be controlled. Anger is one of those things that's both capable of building up and also destroying. And many of us have experiences in our life of the destruction that anger has left. We know it very intimately, so it's really hard to figure out how do we do this in a healthy way. Anger is a lot like water. Water, when it's controlled, right, it's a river that gives life to everything around it. It's beautiful to see. It nourishes. It brings life. And when anger, when it's directed rightly, can bring justice. It can protect the vulnerable. It can repair what's broken. But what happens when water overflows? When it's uncontrolled, it floods. It floods and destroys. And we've seen that, the destruction that water overflowing can bring. And some of us know what it's like when our anger has overflowed. A harsh word that we've said that we wish we could take back. A conversation that just went way too far. A relationship that was washed away in the flood of an unchecked temper. That's what anger can do. Righteous anger mirrors God and brings about His purposes in the world. Righteous anger, unlike sinful anger, flows from love and will lead to healing. But when it's uncontrolled, it leaves destruction in its wake. So we're going to talk about two different types of anger. Righteous anger and sinful anger. Righteous anger and sinful anger. So righteous anger seeks to mirror God. This is good anger. This is when we recognize that our goal is to honor God and the other person or the situation. Righteous anger is fueled by love and not by hate. Righteous anger aims for justice, reconciliation, and healing. Righteous anger is expressed with wisdom, self-control, and gentleness. All three of these ways of expressing it are talked about in Proverbs. It says, a gentle answer turns away wrath. So the way we express our anger matters. Righteous anger honors relationships and restores them. Righteous anger leads to forgiveness and to peace. Here's a question to ask yourself when you are experiencing anger. Is my goal to love this person? Is my goal to have a better friendship? Is my goal to have a better relationship? Because if our goal at the start of that conversation is, I want to prove them wrong, I want to prove that I was right, I want to defend my cause, my reputation, then from the get-go, you have lost. You have lost that relationship. You've already set it up for failure. But if you go in with a sense of, my goal is to love my neighbor, my goal is to love my enemy as best as I can, that starts that relationship from a very different place. Sinful anger, in contrast, is about ourselves. It centers ourselves, and it's not about God. And you know it's about yourself when you're fueled by your pride, your ego, your desires for control. In this situation, you don't seek to understand the other person. You might have an aim of, I'm going to hurt them. You might not say it like that, but there's something in you like, I'm going to get at them. I'm going to poke. I know exactly where to get at them, actually. Some of us know people's like hurting spots. We want to aim to hurt, to punish, to prove right, to put them in their place. The expression of sinful anger matters because these are outbursts. These are sarcasm. These is blame or even silence. Some of us have a lot of power in our silence. We know how to lock people out and get into their heads because we just won't say anything for days or weeks or months, right? Silence is also communicating something. The end goal of this is revenge. It's not reconciliation. And sinful anger always leads to distance, to distrust, and to relational destruction. This is where you harbor that bitterness, that revenge, resentment. One side of that you have sinful anger that I found in Proverbs as I was studying for this is Proverbs 24. It says, do not rejoice when your enemy fails, and let not your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest the Lord see it and be displeased. Gloating when somebody fails is a sign that you have unresolved anger. When you are happy that somebody has failed or people have failed, there's a sign that your heart is infected, not them. I see this a lot on social media, and I've done it myself, right? Well, they just deserve that. Oh, maybe you caused this to happen because of your actions. We see this a lot with politics. Well, all your fault. I knew that was going to happen. And that gloating rather than loving is a sign of where our own hearts are. It's a sign of ourselves. It's pointing to us, not to the other person. We like to think it's about the other person, but it's not them. It's ourselves. Sinful anger sometimes can look like when parents, for example, are angry at children. Perhaps they did something to, it happens to all of us, embarrass in public. We get angry, like, how could you do that? How could you say that, right? But in that moment, who are we trying to protect? What we look like. What we look like as a parent. It's not really about loving that child and teaching them the right way. It's about ourselves. It could be when you offer honest feedback to somebody. Perhaps you offer honest feedback, and instead of responding, that person just goes silent or pulls away from the relationship. And there's a pride and a defensiveness in that. So they're just trying to protect themselves, and they have lost sight of the relationship. They're more upset about looking bad than about the strength of that relationship. Now, I want to move into practicals about how do we handle anger rightly. But before that, I just want to give a pastoral note. Some of us are carrying anger because of things that have been done to us that are deeply wrong. Some of us have just minor things, but some of us have things that have been traumatic, ongoing, non-ending, perhaps abuse, perhaps sexual abuse, emotional, physical from the past, maybe family trauma, maybe parents who never showed up to you, for you, maybe people who've cut you off, maybe decades of a family feud that just never has ended and you've been caught in the middle of that. I want you to know that that situation of brokenness, God hurts for you too. God is angry about abuse, about violence, about that kind of trauma, about people, leaders who promise one thing and don't deliver. That breaks God's heart too. And so while we are called to steward our anger in a healthy way, that does not mean that the things that those people did or do are okay. It doesn't dismiss it or say that that is okay, that that behavior is okay. But just like water can be a life-giving force or a destructive one in our relationships, in our world, our own anger can bring life or destruction, not just to other people, but to ourselves. It can destroy us too. It can ruin our own souls and our walk with God. When we harbor bitterness or anger or resentment, and we don't steward that in a healthy way, when we don't learn to forgive or have an honest conversation, that inner anger is infecting us. It's infecting me. It's infecting you. It's enslaving you and me. It is not punishment for the other person. We hold on to those things because we think it's going to punish the other person somehow in our head. We think we can carry justice in our own hand by staying angry at someone. But actually, it is infecting our own soul. And because God is for you and God wants freedom for you, He doesn't want you to stay in bondage forever, not even for another day. You are meant to live free and in a way that is life-giving. Some of us are holding on to those wounds for too long. And we're waiting for someone else to take a first step when we are the ones to take that first step. Jesus offers a way of freedom. Anger gives us an opportunity to learn how to become like Jesus. Some of us are going to unlearn, hopefully all of us are going to unlearn those old patterns and learn the way of Jesus. Learn to forgive, learn to communicate in a different way, learn to express our desires, our needs. And perhaps some of us are angry about bigger things than just what's in this room or in our families, but about things in the world. And we're going to partner with God in bringing justice because that anger will be fueled rightly. So how do we handle anger wisely? There's several phrases that repeat in Proverbs, and I'm going to read them. A hot-tempered man stirs up discord, but he who is slow to anger quiets contention. A fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. A man of wrath stirs up strife, and one given to anger causes much transgression. There is an emphasis throughout Proverbs on being slow to anger. Over and over again, there are many verses that say, be slow to anger. Do you know who else is slow to anger? All right, one person knows. God. Yes, thank you, Daryl. Yes, God is slow to anger. God is described as slow to anger. There are many scriptures that describe God like this. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. So when we are slow to anger, it is an opportunity for us to be like God in the world. Be slow to anger. What does it mean to be slow to anger? Sometimes that means taking space. Do I need space to cool off and to think? We don't have to respond right away. It is wise to take a break and say, I need to talk about that later. Can we come back to that? Because I just need space to cool off. In that time, you can ask questions. There's a lot of questions here, but you can ask, what am I really feeling? Okay? So this is something my therapist has taught me, because anger is a secondary emotion. And she often says, your anger is covering your primary emotion. What that means is anger feels powerful, and for a lot of us, it feels more comfortable than the more vulnerable emotions of sadness and of grief, of disappointment that are actually underneath anger. And so one of the things we could do is think about, what am I actually sad about? Maybe this job just didn't go the way I thought it was going to go. Maybe my life just hasn't gone the way I thought it was going to go. Maybe I'm just disappointed by these actions because of the impact that it had on someone else. And accessing those deeper emotions are really key, Because if you come off with just that anger, you're going to be uncontrolled and flooding people and overwhelming them. But if you can get to the deeper stuff, what's really bothering you? What's underneath it? Sadness and anger. Sadness and hurt, disappointment, the deeper emotions. And then you can ask a question. You can go back, sorry. Was I truly wronged or am I being petty? Is this something that I have the patience to overlook? One of the words for being slow to anger is actually being patient. That there's a patience. That people who are wise with their anger have some patience with their anger. And so is it something that I can overlook? Maybe I'm reading too much into this. The second thing is just examine the root. And these two kind of go hand in hand when you're slowing down. But ask, what am I defending? What part of this is me? There's definitely something that's probably the other person, the other people, the other situation, whatever. But what part of this is me? What part of this is my ego, my reputation, my control, my status, whatever is me? And do some reflection with God on this. And also ask, is there a deeper wound being triggered? Have you ever been with somebody and the both of you experience the same thing and you are so fired up about it and the other person's like, it wasn't a big deal. Anybody ever been there? Yes. You're like, why don't you care? It doesn't feel like a big deal. Why? Because sometimes the thing that is triggering us is from our personal deeper wounds, the things we care about. It might not even be woundings. It might just be things that God has deeply given to us as issues we care about in the world. But maybe that person doesn't have that same sense. And so that is a question of, is there something deeper for me that is being triggered, that is separate from other people? And that tells me something about me. Third, and I think this is where the supernatural of what God can do happens, is prayer. Bringing your stuff to God first. What God can do is beyond what you can do. And I'm laughing because I saw that this week. God will help you see another person with his eyes and not with your own. We often are very aware of ourselves. We know our story. We know what we've been through. We know what the week was like. So we have a lot of grace for ourselves. But when we think about somebody else, all we see is what they did. We don't see their wounding. We don't see their story. We don't see what God is doing in their life. You don't see how far they've even come. But God can help you see that. This week, Ashish and I had, we've talked about this, so it's okay for me to share this. You're like, oh, what am I about to hear? Ashish and I had a conversation that got a little heated this week. And this wasn't one of those forgiveness situations. We both just had really strong opinions about something, an issue that matters really strongly to us. Ashish felt one way, I felt another way, and we were talking about this issue for hours. We both felt really passionately. And, we're going back and forth about how we both feel, what we both think, and it really wasn't going anywhere. Both of us are not budging. So, I think it was like 10:30 at night. We're like, we gotta sleep. And so we just said, we're gonna shelf this, and we're gonna come back to another time. And in between, out of nowhere, God just met me, like the days after, and gave me an insight, not about him, but about me. He showed me something about myself that I could not see when we were talking. And that insight, it was so beautiful that even when I shared it, I just started to weep. Because it felt like, God, you see me, you know me, you love me. And I was bringing that into this, and I had no idea. But you were so kind and so loving that you would show this to me about myself. And when I told Ashish with all my tears, Ashish said, oh, God actually met me too. But completely different from what I had. And something for him about how he was to handle this situation. And so both of us were met by God in a supernatural way that gave us peace that was beyond our own wisdom. It was not something we would have come up with on our own in that heated moment. So that space was really important, but God works in that slowed down space. It is okay to not finish everything in one conversation. God worked in between those days that we had to just sit on it, be with God. And God really met me and really met him. Second thing to do in prayer is to bless, or third thing, is to bless the other person. If this is with a person, in our situation, it was an issue that we were trying to figure out. If it's with another person, can you get to a place of prayer of blessing them? Can you get to a place before you ever have a conversation of saying, God, want the best for them. I love them. I want to bless them to walk in your ways, to walk in the fullness of the life that you have for them. Because if you can do that in prayer and in your heart, you're going to start that conversation, if you have one, in a much better spot. So try to bless them in prayer. And this might be days, it might be weeks, it might be years. Who knows? Because some of us might be carrying stuff that's been years long. So try to bless them. The next step is if this anger is around a person. Some of us have anger that's not related to people, just other things. But I want to make sure we have steps about handling this with people. And this is directly from Scripture. So I'm going to read this, Mathew 18, verses 15 to 17. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault, just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church, and if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Now, these verses, if you've never learned this, tell you how to handle conflict with another person. I know some of our conflict is not with people, but this is just in that situation. And some of us are new to following Jesus. So in a situation where you have an issue with something or there's a person that you have an issue with, once you have prayed and you've examined it and you've sat with it and you're slow to it, your next step is to talk directly to the person that you have the issue with. On our leadership team of this church, we have a saying that says, don't let baby elephants grow. You know, like the thing like the elephant in the room? We're not going to let that elephant grow. So that means nip it early by don't let the baby elephant grow. Any relationship you have with anyone, if you get close enough, you're going to have conflict. It's natural. It's not the enemy. If you're not having conflict with somebody, it's probably because they're just like a small talk kind of friend that you just see on the street and then you just keep it moving. But if you have conflict with somebody, there's a depth that is developing. And so your step is to talk directly to the person. Sometimes maybe it's not a person thing. Maybe you're mad about something, I don't know, like maybe the sidewalk's outside or something. I don't know. Where we live, people have issues with sidewalks. But talk to the person who's responsible for the sidewalk. Don't go talking around to all the other people about the sidewalk. Go to the person who's responsible for those things. So talk directly. Don't let the baby elephant grow. Because if you don't talk directly, that's when other things start to grow in your heart about that person, or maybe you're making things grow by telling other people, and then all these people are making things grow together that aren't necessarily true. If someone comes to you and they're talking about that issue, the sidewalk, or if they're talking to you about somebody else, here's what you can ask to redirect them. Have you talked to them yet? That is a gentle way to say, it's not my responsibility, that's between you. Have you talked to them yet? Because otherwise, it's gossip. It's slander. Now, when you get into that conversation, what can you do? 1, focus on the issue that bothered you. Make it about the issue. You know, when you did this, when you said this, this is how it impacted me. Don't accuse their character, because as soon as you accuse somebody's character, their anger is going to get triggered, like that angry red guy in the movie. That's what's going to go off in their head. So make it about the issue. Be kind and gentle. Proverbs says, a gentle answer turns away wrath. Be kind and gentle. Be open to being wrong. Do you know how many times I've gotten into a conversation thinking that I had all the facts? Be open to being wrong. That person might have another perspective. So be open to being wrong, and that perhaps you might need to apologize. Affirm the relationship. This is actually a good one to start from the beginning, is saying, I love you, I value you, I care about this friendship, and that's why I want to have this conversation. And then lastly, remember your goal is to seek forgiveness, reconciliation. The goal is to love one another, to love even our enemies. This is what Jesus has done for us. This is what we are called to do for one another. Now, if somebody does not listen, that's where Matthew 18 says, if they don't listen, then you take one or two other people along. So if somebody's unwilling to change, unwilling to listen, then you take somebody else along. But that is not your first thing. The first thing is just go directly to that person. So there is an escalation that we do depending on how severe it is and how people are responding. So you go wider when you need to get help. So lastly, what do we do when our attempts to reconcile? Because there are situations where, most situations in our life, we can accomplish that sense of forgiveness and reconciliation love. But there are a few in our lives where our attempts to reconcile are not going to be received by the other person. There are situations in our life that we don't have control over. So what do we do there? There are also situations in our life where perhaps somebody is repeatedly wronging you. And what I mean by that is there are people who are abusive, people who might not be listening to change, people who might not be willing to forgive, people who might have a pattern. And that's where boundaries are really helpful, especially if your safety is at risk. So please know that I'm not saying go be reconciled to somebody who's harming you. That's not necessarily the next step here. But we are to be people of forgiveness. We are to be people of forgiveness. And the good news with forgiveness is that forgiveness is something you can do even without another person involved. It's something that you do with God. It's something that you can do between you and God to forgive one another. Reconciliation, to be right with somebody, will require that other person. But to forgive somebody is something that you can do with God. In our family, this is one of our values, is forgiveness. And when we first started it with Athena, when she was just learning to talk, like at 2 years old, it seemed silly to ask a 2-year-old to ask for forgiveness. But over time, the fruit of that has actually been we've been seeing the fruit of the fact that she has learned to ask for forgiveness. So one of the things we do in our family is we ask our children and ourselves, to our kids, to own our emotions. They're ours. So, when they're really little, they'll say, "You made me angry." No. Nobody made you angry. You're angry because something happened. Okay, own your emotions. 2, own your actions. What did you do? Own that. 3, apologize for your end. 4, ask forgiveness. Do you forgive me? Do you forgive me? And then 5, we go to reconciliation once they are saying, "Yes, I forgive you." And this is where we do hugs and kisses and tickles, and there's laughter. But what we want to model is that it is not okay in relationship to hurt one another and then just walk out on each other. It is not okay to leave things unresolved in our family. And so in our family from an early age, what we're saying is, yes, we as parents are going to ask you for forgiveness when we wrong you, which we do, and that you can also ask us, and we can also ask each other. Our ability to forgive is not dependent on the person. Our ability to forgive is dependent on Jesus. Because of how much Jesus has forgiven us, we keep that in front of us. And we say, the God of the universe has let nothing separate us from him. Nothing. And we are adopted into his family. We are his beloved. And because the God of the universe has done this, I am following in his way, and I will forgive. It might take a few repetitions, it might take some time, but I am going to forgive. The God of the universe, who knows the depth of my own sin, my own wrongdoing, and still chooses to love me, still chooses to walk with me, still holds on to me, never lets me go. The God of the universe loves you and forgives you, and that makes it so much easier to forgive one another. Where I'm going to end today is I'm going to give us a little chance to reflect. And so the worship team is just going to play really lightly in the background, but I'm going to give us some reflection questions. And if you have a piece of paper, you can pull out a piece of paper. If you have your phone, notes, don't go to Instagram, don't go to Facebook. If you have notes, here are 3 questions. What? It could be a situation in the world. It doesn't have to be a person. It could be a situation in the world. What or who are you angry about or with these days? And you're just taking this as time to bring that to God. What is the next step that God is inviting you to take? That might mean that you just need to begin praying for that situation. Maybe you need to begin praying for the person. Maybe you just need to slow down. What is the next step that God is inviting you to take? And then a deeper reflection question is, how is God inviting you to become like him through this situation? God uses the situations of our lives to help us become like Jesus. So God, would you help us become aware of what you are doing? I'm going to pray for us, and then we're going to give a few minutes for reflection. Lord, you are stirring things up in us. God, we thank you that you are a God of freedom, but we can't experience freedom if we don't bring it to you. God, you are a God who transforms. And so, Lord, would we trust you enough to bring the things, the situations of our world, the people in our lives, maybe something at work, maybe something in our families, maybe something even generationally that has gone on for decades and decades. Help us to trust you with it. So, Lord, bring this stuff to mind and help us to encounter you in these next few minutes.